The spaceport was alive with noise, light, and movement. Ships came and went, their engines roaring like thunder. Aliens of many shapes and colors hurried across the huge landing platforms. Some carried boxes, some shouted orders, and others spoke in strange voices that echoed through the metal walls. In the middle of all this chaos, a small sound rose above the rest. It was the sharp cry of a child. The cry grew louder, sharper, until every head in the crowd turned. A little alien girl stood near the center of the hall. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes large and glowing with tears. Her small body shook as she screamed. She looked lost. She looked afraid. The air around her changed. Guards with tall spears and flashing armor turned toward her. Their helmets glowed red and their weapons hummed. People stepped back quickly, whispering to each other. "Is she in danger?" one alien hissed. "Is it an attack?" another whispered. "Should we call the Queen's guards?" Fear spread faster than fire. The girl's crying grew louder. She pressed her hands to her face. Her body shook like she was drowning in terror. The noise she made hurt the ears of the crowd. Alarms began to ring. Red lights flashed across the ceiling. Something was very wrong, and in the corner of the hall a human traveler stopped walking. He was an ordinary man, dressed in simple clothes. He carried no weapons, no strange devices, only a small bag slung over his shoulder. He looked tired from travel, but his eyes softened as he saw the child. For a long moment he stood still, watching. He could see the way the guards moved closer. Their weapons were almost ready. He saw the way the crowd pulled back, afraid. But he did not see danger in the girl's tears. He saw pain. He saw fear, and he knew that fear very well. Slowly, carefully, the human stepped forward. His steps echoed on the metal floor. The aliens turned, glaring at him. Some shouted warnings. "Stay back, human. Do not interfere." She could be dangerous. But he did not stop. He walked until he was close enough to see her trembling hands. He lowered himself to her level, crouching down on one knee. The girl's eyes, wet with tears, blinked up at him. Her glowing pupils widened. For a moment the world froze. The guards stood ready to strike. The crowd held their breath. The alarm screamed, and the human reached into his pocket. From the pocket, he pulled out a small plastic toy. It was simple, bright, and almost laughable in this high-tech world. A small bubble wand. The aliens frowned in confusion. The guards looked at each other. The child sniffled, staring at the strange little stick in his hand. The human smiled softly. His voice was low, gentle, almost like a whisper. "It's okay," he said. "Watch this." He dipped the wand into a small bottle of soapy liquid. Then slowly, he raised it to his lips. The guards tensed. The crowd leaned forward. The girl blinked. Her cries quieter now, caught between fear and curiosity. Then with one gentle breath the human blew, and bubbles filled the air. Dozens of them, floating, shining, glowing under the lights. They drifted slowly, soft and harmless. They reflected the flashing red alarms, turning the air into rivers of light. The child's mouth opened. Her cries stopped. She reached out with small fingers, chasing one bubble as it floated down. When it popped, she let out a small laugh. Then another. Then more. Her tears dried as her laughter grew. The guards froze, confused. The crowd gasped. The human blew again, and more bubbles floated into the air. The girl clapped her hands together, trying to catch them. She laughed louder, her fear forgotten. The sound of laughter spread across the hall. It was soft at first, then stronger. The aliens who had stepped back leaned forward again. Their fear melted into wonder. Even the guards lowered their weapons, unsure what to do. A moment ago there had been chaos. Now there was peace. The human did not say much. He only kept smiling, kept blowing bubbles, watching the girl laugh as if the world around them had vanished, but not everyone was smiling. In the shadows of a high balcony, a tall figure stood silently. She was hidden beneath a dark cloak, her face hidden by the hood. Her eyes glowed faintly, filled with sharp focus. The queen had been watching. Her daughter's tears had shaken her heart. But this human's strange act shook her more. She had seen warriors fight, leaders command, machines destroy, but never had she seen peace created with something so small, so fragile, so human. Her eyes narrowed. She did not smile. She did not laugh. She watched in silence, her judgment forming, like a storm. The human below had no idea. He thought he was calming a child. He did not know that the most powerful woman in the empire was watching every move he made, and she would not forget it. The bubbles floated through the air like tiny stars, each one glowing in the bright light of the spaceport. Some drifted high, toward the ceiling, others floated low enough for the child to catch. The crowd that had once pulled back in fear now leaned closer, whispering in disbelief. The little alien girl reached out her trembling hands. Her fingers touched a bubble and it popped with a soft snap. She blinked. For the first time since her cries began, her face changed. Fear faded. Curiosity replaced it. Another bubble floated past her cheek. She gasped. Then she laughed. A small, broken laugh, but real. She chased after it with clumsy steps, her tiny feet echoing against the metal floor. The sound of her laughter spread like light through a dark room. The human smiled. He dipped the wand again and blew gently. More bubbles spun into the air, dancing like fragile jewels. The girl squealed with joy and ran after them. The guards, frozen with weapons half raised, glanced at one another. Their glowing helmets reflected the bubbles. They were trained for war, for danger, for enemies with guns and blades. But they had never trained for this. How could they fight bubbles? How could they fight laughter? One guard lowered his weapon. Another followed. Soon the entire line of armored soldiers stood in silence, watching the strange scene unfold. The aliens in the crowd whispered, "Impossible. Humans are strange creatures." He calmed her, just like that. The alarm still flashed red across the ceiling, but the sense of danger was gone. Instead, there was wonder. Suspicion remained, yes, but curiosity was stronger. The little girl laughed again, louder this time. She clapped her hands together, popping bubble after bubble. Her glowing eyes sparkled. The fear that had once drowned her was gone, replaced with joy. For the human, this was simple. He had done this many times before, at parks, at markets, with children who were sad or frightened. He knew bubbles had a magic of their own. They were harmless, but they caught light. They floated free, like tiny dreams that drifted beyond reach. Children always forgot their tears when they saw them. But here, in this alien hall filled with strange beings and soldiers, even he felt the weight of what had just happened. The silence of the guards, the stares of the crowd, the sudden laughter of a child who had moments before seemed lost to fear. He had no idea that every second was being judged from above. The queen, hidden in her cloak, stood still. She had watched her daughter cry. She had felt her heart twist with pain at every scream. And now she watched as a stranger, a human of all things, calmed her child with nothing but soap and air. She could not believe what she saw. She had ruled empires, crushed rebellion, silenced enemies. She knew fear. She knew power. She knew strength. But this was something else, something unfamiliar, something dangerous in its own way. Her advisor leaned close to her in the shadows. His voice was low, sharp. "My queen, should we stop him? This could be a trick." The queen's eyes narrowed. She did not answer. She kept watching, silent as stone. The girl ran to the human now, tugging at his sleeve, begging for more bubbles. He chuckled softly and blew again, the air filled with another rainbow of floating lights. The girl clapped, her laughter echoing through the spaceport like music. The crowd could not look away. Warriors, traders, strangers, they all watched in awe. Some even smiled. And yet beneath the laughter there was tension. "What is he doing?" whispered one alien. "Why would a human care for her?" said another. "Maybe it's a trick. Maybe the bubbles are poison." The whispers grew, but no one moved. No one dared stop him. The human ignored the voices. His focus was only on the girl, and on her joy. He blew bubbles again and again until the red lights of the alarm no longer seemed threatening. But high above, the Queen's judgment deepened. She could not decide what frightened her more, the child's earlier cries or the sudden peace this human had created. Her eyes locked on him. She wanted to know why. Why would he do this? Why would he, a stranger, comfort a child who was not his own? Did he seek reward? Was this some hidden plan? Or was it something else, something truly human? The girl tugged at the human's hand, smiling brightly. The guards stepped back, lowering their weapons fully. The alarms quieted one by one until the spaceport returned to its usual hum of voices and engines. But everything had changed. The child was calm. The crowd was silent. The guards were uncertain. And the Queen had seen enough to know that this human was no ordinary traveler. Still hidden in the shadows, she whispered to herself, "This one is different." The human smiled, unaware of the eyes watching him, unaware of the storm his simple act had started. And though the child was calm, now the real tension was only just beginning. High above the spaceport floor, hidden in the shadows of the balcony, the Queen stood still as stone. Her cloak covered her royal armor, and the hood shielded her glowing eyes. None of the crowd below knew she was there. None guessed that the ruler of an empire was watching silently, but she saw everything. Her daughter's tears had nearly torn her heart apart. The child's cries were like blades to her soul, though the Queen never showed her pain. To be a ruler meant to stay cold, to hide weakness, to wear strength like iron. Even as her little one had screamed, she had not moved, had not spoken, had not comforted. That was not her way. That was not the way of queens. And yet, a stranger had stepped forward. Not one of her guards, not one of her servants, not one of her people, a human, an outsider. A creature from a small, unimportant planet. And with nothing but a toy, he had done what all her soldiers could not. He had silenced the cries. He had brought peace. The Queen's eyes narrowed as she watched the bubbles drift upward, their soft rainbow reflections glowing against the metal walls. They were harmless, fragile, childish, and yet they had power. Not the kind of power she knew, not the kind that conquered empires, but another kind, a hidden kind. Her advisor, standing close by in the shadows, bent toward her ear. His voice was sharp, cautious. "My Queen," he whispered, "this is dangerous. The human distracts the child, but perhaps it is a trick. Shall I order the guards to remove him?" The Queen did not answer. She kept her gaze on the scene below. The human crouched again, blowing another line of bubbles. The child clapped her hands together, chasing them with laughter. Her glowing eyes shone with joy. She tugged at his sleeve, begging for more. The Queen felt her chest tighten. It was rare, almost painful. It was not anger, not pride, something else. Something she had buried long ago. Her advisor spoke again, louder this time. "My Queen, this could be an insult, a trap. Shall I—" "Silence," she said softly. The word cut sharper than any blade. The advisor froze, lowering his head at once. He did not speak again. The Queen leaned on the railing, her eyes never leaving the human. Every movement he made, every breath, every smile, it was all recorded in her mind. She thought of her daughter, a princess of the empire, born with power in her blood, raised to lead armies. And yet in her darkest fear, she had not wanted a sword or a shield. She had wanted comfort, a simple hand to guide her, a distraction from pain. And she had found it in a human. The Queen's thoughts grew darker. She remembered the wars with humankind. They were reckless, fragile, weaker than most species. And yet, they were stubborn. They adapted quickly. They survived where others fell. Many of her generals had warned her humans could not be trusted. But now here was one human. Not fighting, not resisting, not demanding, just blowing bubbles for a crying child. The Queen folded her hands behind her back. Her judgment was not yet made, but she knew this. The man below was dangerous. Not because of weapons, not because of strength, but because of something far more unpredictable. Compassion. That was the one thing she did not understand. The crowd below began to murmur again. Some aliens smiled at the scene, charmed by the child's laughter. Others frowned, suspicious of the human's motives. The guards looked lost, unsure if they had failed in their duty or succeeded by standing still. And the queen, hidden above, knew she must decide what to do. Should she reward this human or punish him? Should she thank him for helping her daughter, or strike him down before he spread more of this dangerous softness among her people? Her fingers tightened on the balcony rail. No one had ever dared to calm her daughter. No one had ever dared to step so close to the heir of the throne. This human had done both without even knowing who the child was. That alone was bold, perhaps even foolish. But boldness was not always weakness. Sometimes, boldness was power. The queen studied him longer. His face was calm, his hands were steady. He did not look up, did not search for attention, did not try to win the crowd. He only cared about the child's laughter. That, she thought, was the strangest thing of all. Her advisor shifted nervously beside her. "My queen, what are your orders?" The queen did not speak at first. She turned her head slightly, her glowing eyes fixed on the human below. "Watch him," she whispered at last. The advisor bowed, confused but obedient. The queen stayed in the shadows. Her judgment was silent for now, but her interest was set. This human had caught her eye, not by skill in battle, not by clever words, but by something far more dangerous, the ability to change hearts without even trying. And in the queen's mind, that was a power greater than armies. She pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders, her expression unreadable. The human below had no idea she was watching. He had no idea the fate of his life, perhaps even the fate of his species, now rested in her hands. And so the queen waited, silent, patient, judging. The laughter of the alien child echoed across the great spaceport hall. Her bright voice bounced off the metal walls, mixing with the soft pop of bubbles. For many, it was a strange, almost magical sound. It carried peace where only fear had been moments before. But not everyone felt peace. In the crowd, whispers began to stir. Some aliens leaned toward one another, speaking in hushed voices. Their eyes darted nervously toward the human. "What trick is this?" one asked. "Bubbles cannot be this powerful. There must be something hidden in them." "Yes," another said. "What if the bubbles are poison? What if they carry dust to weaken us?" Fear has a way of twisting even harmless things into weapons. And now, the fear of the unknown spread like a shadow. A tall, alien merchant pulled his child closer, shielding her behind his cloak. "Do not touch them," he warned. "Do not touch the human's magic." Another alien hissed, "Why is he here? What does he want? Humans are never without reason." The guards, still standing in formation, shifted uneasily. Their weapons were lowered, but not forgotten. They were trained to strike when danger appeared. And though the crying child had calmed, some part of them still saw danger in the human's actions. One guard stepped forward, his armor glowing faintly. His voice was deep, metallic through the helmet. "Human," he barked. "What is this? Sorcery, speak at once." The human looked up for only a moment. His face was calm, almost confused. He held the small bottle in one hand, the wand in the other. Slowly, he blew again. More bubbles floated upward, shining harmlessly in the light. The guard clenched his fist. "Answer me!" But before he could move closer, the little alien girl laughed again, running into the human's side. She reached up, tugging his sleeve, pointing at the bubbles with delight. Her laughter was so pure, so filled with joy, that even the guard hesitated. Still, the unease did not vanish. The crowd's whispers grew louder. Suspicion spread. Some aliens shook their heads, muttering about tricks, about human cleverness, about dangerous games. In the shadows above, the queen listened to every word. Her glowing eyes scanned the scene. She could hear the suspicion rising. She could see the tension building in the guards' stances. She knew that fear, once planted, could grow fast and wild, and she let it grow, for silence was her weapon. Judgment came only when the time was right. The little girl chased after another bubble, her laughter cutting through the whispers. For her, there was no danger. For her, the bubbles were joy. But for the crowd, every laugh carried a question. Why would a human do this? A voice rose suddenly from the far side of the hall. A tall alien with scarred skin stepped forward, pointing a sharp finger toward the human. "He distracts us," the alien shouted. "This is a trick to lower our guard. Arrest him before it is too late." The hall erupted. Some shouted in agreement. Others argued back. "He saved the child." "He is dangerous. He brings peace." "No, he brings chaos." The guards looked uncertain. Their leader gave no command. Their helmets turned left and right as the voices of the crowd clashed. The human kneeling beside the girl seemed unaware of the storm around him. He only smiled as she caught another bubble and squealed with joy. He spoke softly, words only. She could hear. "See? They're just bubbles. Nothing scary." But the crowd did not believe so easily. The alien who had called for his arrest stepped forward again, his voice rising above the rest. "Look at him. Look at his calm face. He hides his plan well. That is no toy. That is a weapon in disguise." The girl shook her head, clutching the human's hand. She did not understand the words, but she understood the anger. Her eyes glowed, brighter, and she pressed herself close to the man who had saved her from fear. For a brief moment it seemed the guards might obey the crowd. They might step forward, surround the human, and drag him away in chains. But from above, the queen's eyes narrowed. Her advisor leaned close again. "Your Majesty, this will spread. Fear of the human will turn into hate. If you give the order, we can stop it now. Shall we?" The queen did not answer. She studied her daughter, who clung tightly to the human's sleeve. She studied the human, who blew another set of bubbles, ignoring the danger around him. She studied the crowd, divided between wonder and suspicion. And in that silence, the whispers grew into shouts. "Arrest him! Protect him! Kill him! Save him!" The hall became a storm of voices, clashing louder and louder. And yet through it all, the bubbles kept floating, soft, fragile, and bright. The queen finally spoke, her voice low, cold, but filled with weight. "Not yet." Her advisor bowed quickly, though unease filled his face. The queen's judgment was not ready. The human had caught her daughter's heart. He had caught her eye. But whether he was savior or threat, that truth had not yet been revealed. She turned her gaze back to the crowd below, her silence shaping their fear, her judgment waiting like a blade above the human's neck. The whispers of danger had begun, and soon, whispers would turn into action. The hall still trembled with voices. Some shouted for the human to be taken away, others argued to let him stay. Guards shifted nervously, weapons glowing faintly. The air felt heavy, thick with suspicion, but through the noise, the human remained calm. He knelt beside the little alien girl, holding the bubble wand gently in his hand. She clung to him, her glowing eyes wide with trust. For her, there was no question. For her, he was safety. One guard finally stepped forward, his voice hard and commanding. "Human, explain yourself. What is this trick? Why have you done this?" The crowd hushed. All eyes turned to him. The human looked around slowly. He saw the guards with weapons ready. He saw the suspicious faces in the crowd. He saw the fear, the anger, the confusion, and he sighed. "They're just bubbles," he said simply. A murmur spread. Some laughed bitterly. Others shook their heads. Lies. Impossible. He hides his real plan. The guard lifted his weapon higher. "Answer with truth. What is your purpose here? Why calm the child? What do you want from her?" The human's eyes softened. He glanced at the little girl who still held onto his sleeve. She was smiling again, her tears forgotten. He raised the wand and blew once more. A stream of bubbles floated upward, glowing under the bright lights. He caught one in his palm, holding it carefully until it popped. Then he spoke again. "Children cry," he said. His voice was calm, steady, but filled with quiet weight. "It doesn't matter if they are human or alien. They cry because they are scared. And when a child is scared, you don't shout. You don't point weapons. You show them something simple, something gentle, something that reminds them the world is not only fear." His words were plain, almost too plain for such a grand hall filled with alien warriors, and yet they carried a strength that weapons did not. The crowd grew quiet. Even the guards hesitated. The human looked at them all, his voice carrying softly but clearly. "I blew bubbles because I had nothing else. I didn't do it for power. I didn't do it for reward. I did it because she was crying, and no child should be left in fear." Silence spread like a wave. The crowd stared, unable to answer. The guard lowered his weapon slightly, uncertainty crossing his face. The child tugged on the human's sleeve, giggling again as another bubble floated by. She reached for it with both hands, her laughter echoing in the stillness. The sound broke the tension. For a moment, the hall did not feel like a battlefield. It felt like a playground, but not everyone was moved. The scarred alien who had shouted earlier pushed forward again, his voice sharp with anger. "Do not believe him. Humans are clever liars. They speak of peace while hiding blades. He wants to gain our trust, and once he has it, he will strike." A few aliens nodded, but their voices were weaker now. Many in the crowd still stared at the human, their eyes filled with doubt, but also with something else. Curiosity. The human did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply shook his head. "You think too much," he said quietly. Sometimes it's not a plan. Sometimes it's just kindness. Kindness." The word seemed strange in the grand hall. Heavy armor, sharp weapons, loud alarms. These were the language of the Empire. But kindness? It was almost alien to them. From above, the queen listened closely. Her eyes narrowed. Kindness. The word echoed in her mind. It was not a word used in her throne room. It was not a weapon used in war. It was not something she trusted. Yet it had stopped her daughter's tears when all her soldiers could not. Her advisor leaned closer, whispering again. "Your Majesty, do not be fooled. His words are soft, but his kind are dangerous. Shall we silence him now?" The queen did not answer. She studied the man's face. There was no fear in him, but also no arrogance. He spoke simply, like one who had nothing to hide. She hated how difficult it was to read him. Below, the little girl laughed again, chasing another bubble. The human smiled and patted her head gently. "She's brave," he said softly, though the hall was quiet enough for many to hear. She only needed to be reminded that fear is not forever. The crowd shifted again. Some looked at the child, smiling now instead of weeping, and their suspicion weakened. Others crossed their arms, refusing to be moved. But one thing was certain. The human's words had changed the air. The storm of anger was quieter. The whispers of danger were fewer. Doubt remained, but so did wonder. The queen folded her arms beneath her cloak. Her judgment was not complete, but her interest deepened. This man had not begged for mercy, had not tried to defend himself with lies or excuses. He had only spoken of children, of fear, of kindness. It was strange, it was dangerous, and it was unforgettable. For the first time in many years, the queen felt torn. Should she strike him down as a threat to her people? Or should she keep him alive to learn more of this dangerous power he carried, the power of simple humanity? Her decision would come soon. But for now, she waited. Silent, watching, judging. The hall was silent. The child laughed softly as she chased another bubble, but the crowd did not laugh with her. They stood frozen, unsure if the danger was over or only just beginning. The guards kept their weapons lowered, though their fingers twitched nervously against the triggers. All eyes were fixed on the human. He did not move much. He sat on one knee, holding the small wand and bottle, letting the child enjoy herself. His calmness only confused the aliens more. Was he brave or foolish? Was this peace real or just a mask? But above them all, in the dark balcony, the queen finally made her choice. She had watched long enough. Her cloak shifted as she stepped forward into the light. Gasps rose from the crowd at once. The hood fell back and her face was revealed. Sharp, strong, glowing with power. Her crown gleamed faintly against the shadow of her hood. The guards dropped to one knee. The crowd bent low. Even her advisor bowed deeply, the hall filled with the sound of voices shouting in respect. The Queen. Her Majesty. All honor to the throne. Only two figures did not kneel. The child, too young to understand, and the human, too shocked to move. His eyes widened. He had known he was being watched, but not by her, not by the ruler of the empire, not by the most feared leader in this part of the galaxy. The Queen's gaze fell on him like a blade. Her glowing eyes burned into him. The hall grew so quiet that the hum of the ships outside could be heard. She walked slowly down the stairs, from the balcony. Each step echoed. Her cloak trailed behind her like a dark river. The guards kept their heads low, but their eyes followed her every move. The human did not move. He stayed where he was, with the child still clinging to his sleeve. At last the Queen stopped in front of him. She looked down at her daughter first. The child's face was glowing with joy, her small hands reaching for another bubble. Then the Queen's eyes shifted to the human. Her voice was low, deep and sharp. You, human, do you know who this child is? The man swallowed but spoke honestly. No. She is my daughter, the Queen said. Her voice carried across the entire hall. She is the heir to the throne, the future ruler of this empire. Gasps filled the room again. The crowd bowed lower. The guards pressed their fists to their chests in respect. The human froze. He looked at the child in shock. She was no ordinary girl. She was royalty. A princess. The Queen's expression hardened. And you dared to touch her, to calm her, to speak to her without permission. The crowd murmured. Some nodded, expecting the Queen's wrath. Others glanced nervously at the human, wondering if this was his final moment. The Queen's voice grew colder. Why? Why did you do this? The human looked down at the girl, who was still smiling, still holding his sleeve as though he was her protector. He took a deep breath and lifted his head. Because she was scared, he said softly. Because no child should cry like that. Not even a queen's child. His words echoed in the silent hall. They were simple, but they carried weight. The Queen narrowed her eyes. She stepped closer, so near that her cloak brushed against him. The guards tensed, ready to strike if she gave the command. Do you know, she whispered, her voice like steel, that I could end your life here and now? The human met her gaze. His voice did not shake. Yes. Then why do you not beg for mercy? He shook his head. Because I did nothing wrong. The hall gasped again. Such boldness, spoken before the Queen herself, was unheard of. No alien dared speak that way. But the human's voice was steady, calm, almost too plain to be false. The Queen studied him for a long, heavy moment. Her daughter tugged at her arm, pointing at the bubbles with excitement. Mother, the child said softly. He made the fear go away. The Queen's chest tightened. She did not show it, but her heart shook at the sound of her daughter's voice. She turned her gaze back to the human. Her judgment was ready. The hall waited in silence, breathless. At last, she spoke. This human is no ordinary traveler, she declared. Her voice was strong, carrying to every corner of the hall. He is foolish, yes, reckless, yes, but he carries something rare. Something I have not seen in warriors or leaders or servants. He carries compassion. The crowd gasped. Do not harm him, she commanded. Do not touch him. From this day forward, he is under my watch. The guards bowed at once. The crowd murmured in shock. The human blinked, surprised, but he did not argue. The child laughed again, hugging his arm tightly. The queen turned away, her cloak swirling behind her. But her mind was unsettled. For even as she spared him, she knew something dangerous had begun. She did not fear his strength. She did not fear his weapons. She feared his heart. The queen's footsteps echoed as she turned away from the human. The hall remained frozen, every eye fixed on her tall figure. Her cloak rippled behind her, her crown glinting faintly in the bright lights. No one spoke. No one dared to breathe too loudly. For the word of the queen was law. The human stayed on one knee, the alien child still clinging to his arm. He did not speak, but his heart beat hard in his chest. He had expected punishment, maybe even death. But instead, he had been spared. Still, he could not tell if he had truly earned safety, or if this was only the beginning of something greater, and far more dangerous. The queen stopped in the center of the hall. Slowly, she turned back to face the crowd. Her glowing eyes swept across her people, across the guards, and finally returned to the human. Her voice, cold but clear, filled the air. This man, this human, has done what none of you could. He calmed my daughter when even my strongest warriors failed. Her words shook the crowd. Some lowered their heads in shame. Others stared at the human with new curiosity. But, the queen continued, her tone sharper, do not mistake this for weakness. Do not think this makes humans greater than us. One act does not erase their flaws. Her advisor, still bowing at her side, spoke quickly. Then, my queen, shall we cast him out? Shall we return him to his kind and end this matter? The queen lifted her hand, silencing him. She walked slowly toward the human again. Each step was heavy, filled with power. The guards stiffened. The crowd leaned forward. At last, she stood before him once more. Her daughter looked up at her, still smiling, still holding the bubble wand. Mother, she said softly, he is kind. The queen's heart twisted at her child's words. She remembered the terror in her daughter's cries just minutes ago. She remembered her own helplessness as she stood in the shadows watching. And she remembered the bubbles, simple and fragile, yet powerful enough to turn fear into laughter. Her gaze fell on the human. She searched his face for lies, for pride, for hidden tricks. But there was nothing. His eyes were calm. His body was still. His voice, when he spoke, was plain. I don't want power, he said softly. I don't want reward. I only wanted her to stop crying, that is all. The queen's chest tightened again. She hated how those words pierced her. She hated how simple they were. She hated how much truth they carried. She turned suddenly, her cloak snapping behind her as she faced the hall once more. Listen well, she declared, her voice like thunder. This human will not be punished. He will not be cast out. From this day forward, he is under my protection. He is a guest of the throne. The crowd erupted in shock. Some gasped, some cheered, some muttered with doubt and anger. The scarred alien who had shouted before stepped forward furious. My queen, this is madness. He is a human. You cannot trust his kind. The queen's eyes flashed like fire. She raised her hand, and the hall fell silent at once. Enough, she said coldly. You saw what he did. When fear ruled this hall, when even my guards failed, he brought peace. You call that madness? I call it strength. The scarred alien bowed his head quickly, trembling. The queen's gaze swept the hall once more. Do not forget this day. Do not forget that sometimes power does not come from weapons. Sometimes it comes from the smallest acts. Acts that remind us what it means to be more than conquerors. Her words struck deep. The crowd lowered their heads, many ashamed, many thoughtful. The human, still kneeling, looked up in surprise. He had not expected honor. He had not expected to be called strong for blowing bubbles. But here he was, declared under the Queen's protection. The little girl tugged on his arm again, smiling brightly. "Stay," she whispered. The Queen's eyes softened for only a moment. Then her face hardened again, hiding her weakness. She turned to her advisor. "See that he is guarded. See that he is given shelter. He will remain until I decide what more is to be learned from him." Her advisor bowed deeply. "Yes, my queen." The queen looked at the human one final time. Her voice was softer now, meant only for herself. "This one is dangerous," she whispered, "not because of his strength, but because of his heart." She turned and walked toward the exit, her cloak trailing like shadow behind her. The human stayed frozen, uncertain of his future. The crowd whispered again, but this time with less suspicion and more wonder. And the child laughed once more, chasing another bubble, her joy filling the hall. The queen did not look back. But her mind was restless. For the first time in her reign, she felt a new kind of fear, not of armies, not of rebellions, not of death. She feared the power of humanity, and she knew that power had only just begun to reveal itself.